Hello and welcome to another edition of Weapons and Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson. Just ahead on this week's episode, a new paper from a London-based professor is making some waves in the international intelligence community. We visit with one of the paper's authors, as well as a highly dubious former intelligence officer. Plus, we revisit a familiar company for our weapon of the week as Andruil turns to anime to launch the arrival of one of their newest products. But first, some headlines you may have missed. Ahead of his latest meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, U.S. President Joe Biden announced $375 million in military aid to Ukraine, ensuring the country has the tools it needs to prevail in its fight against Russia. This includes the authorization of a Presidential Drawdown Authority package that will provide Ukraine additional capabilities to meet its most urgent needs. Here are some of the highlights. Ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, aka HIMARS, 155 and 105 millimeter artillery ammunition, tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided anti-tank missiles, also known as TOWs, Javelin and AT-4 anti-armor systems, and air-to-ground cruise missiles, just to name a few. This is the Biden administration's 66th tranche of equipment from DoD inventories for Ukraine since August of 2021.
We stand with Ukraine, now and in the future. That starts on the battlefield. I'm determined to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to prevail in its fight for its survival.
Biden went on to say the U.S. will continue to work with some 50 allies and partners through the Ukraine Defense Contact Group and its associated capability coalitions to provide the support Ukraine needs to win the war. A new report by the DoD's Inspector General says the Navy's primary airborne battle manager, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, has been plagued by problems and the Navy lacks a plan to fix them. Known for the distinctive disc atop its fuselage, the Advanced Hawkeye primarily provides airborne early warning and control for carrier groups. Built by Northrop Grumman since 2007 and called the Digital Quarterback, the IG's report detailed that 62 of an eventual planned fleet of 80 E-2Ds do not meet the required performance capabilities because the Navy is not tracking problems found during operational testing. Among the problems not redacted in the report were locking issues with crew seats, obscured views of tracking screens, and a reference to, quote, "The radar is the aircraft's primary means to detect and track land and sea contacts." An admittedly odd thing to have to point out on an early warning and control aircraft. Among the Inspector General's recommendations, the Navy needs to develop a means to evaluate, track, and address all issues. To its credit, the Navy agreed and said plans would be in place by December 1st. While most Americans are at least familiar with the troop jumps into Normandy on D-Day ahead of the Allied invasion, less known is Operation Market Garden. A little more than 3 months later, the U.S. and Allied troops jumped into the Netherlands as part of a plan to liberate the Dutch. In honor of the operation's 80th anniversary, American troops once again made the leap, this time into a much friendlier reception.
From the first day you're a paratrooper, you realize you're a part of an organization that remembers its history. And coming to events such as Market Garden is a perfect opportunity to tie the past to the present, to demonstrate and show the similarities that exist amongst paratroopers of all generations, and to remember the sacrifices of those that came before us.
35,000 paratroopers from the U.S. and 12 other NATO nations took part in a series of jumps watched by a small group of World War II veterans and some 60,000 spectators. The United States and its allies have enough conventional weapons and delivery systems to take out all of Russia and China's nuclear launch sites in about 2 hours, at least according to a pair of British researchers behind a newly published study titled Masters of the Air: Strategic Stability and Conventional Strikes. It's certainly a bold claim, so I reached out to Matt Shoemaker, a former U.S. intelligence officer, for some context.
you have some pretty strong opinions. Like your background with
Yeah.
your intelligence background, like you were on the Russian desk. So when you see an article that says the U.S. can take out all of Russia and China's nukes in a couple of hours, accurate, inaccurate? What do you think?
That is an extraordinary claim that requires extraordinary evidence to support that. And this particular report is not worth its weight at all, from what I can see.
Shoemaker's assessment is based on his own experience. His day jobs as an intel officer included sitting on the Chinese Nuclear Forces desk and the Russia desk.
When I see a report that claims that the United States and its allies can wipe out Chinese and Russian nuclear forces capabilities within 2 hours using conventional weaponry, the first question I have to ask is, who in the world is claiming this?
That person would be Professor Dan Plesch, who, along with a colleague, authored the Masters of the Air study.
Back in the 1960s, as a teenager, I was extremely interested, particularly with the nuclear threat, and was subscribing to the International Institute for Strategic Studies journals before I ever went to college.
Plesch was involved in the UK's anti-nuclear campaign for years in the 1970s and 80s. He founded the British American Security Information Council, or BASIC, in 1985. It's a think tank working towards nuclear disarmament. Today, Plesch is a professor of diplomacy and strategy at SOAS University of London, where he spent a fair amount of energy raising awareness about the proliferation of conventional weapons.
And some years ago, I wrote a piece for The Conversation because I felt rather frustrated about the way the debate was, which has had about 250,000 reads, I think, about a non-nuclear world war, how viable this was, because it seemed to me that conventional counterforce was really the missing link, the dog that did not bark, choose your cliche.
Conventional counterforce is the military tactic of using conventional weapons to target an adversary's nuclear weapons. During the Cold War, counterforce was all about using nukes to stop nukes. Today, Plesch says the U.S. has more than enough capability to wipe out both Russia and China's nuclear arsenals without ever needing to use its own nukes. Plesch points to programs like Rapid Dragon, which uses cargo planes to launch pallets full of cruise missiles, or the dominance of stealth aircraft as proof of the West holding a decisive advantage over its adversaries. And that imbalance of power, according to Plesch and others, could be fueling a very real arms race with the U.S. and its allies on one side, and Russia, China, and their allies on another. Plesch says while the intent of the West may be to deter adversaries, to China and Russia, the buildup in conventional weapons by the West is a direct threat to both Beijing and Moscow's strategic stability, essentially a misunderstanding of epic proportions.
But I think one has to say, if you have this level of misunderstanding and weapons development and poor understanding about it, then this enhances an already widely acknowledged risk of major war, whether conventional or nuclear. And right now, arms control and disarmament is not wanted on voyage. And I think we would simply say, Putin is not a tougher nut than the Soviet Union. He's materially weaker in many, many ways, and yet we are asked to accept this. So I think it isn't a question. We have a mutual self-interest in securing an arms control solution.
Plesch says there needs to be a soft landing, an off-ramp somewhere that the world can take towards disarmament, both conventional and nuclear. And he hopes his Masters of the Sky report, which shows an overwhelming dominance by the West, can help spark those conversations. But for folks like Matt Shoemaker, Plesch's findings assume too much, like that Russian nuclear subs are fairly easy to track, or that Western air power is so dominant, the Chinese and Russian nuclear threats could be wiped out in about as much time as it takes to watch a movie.
Excuse me? Like, if that were the case, then the Cold War would have been a joke, as if we had nothing to worry about.
Shoemaker says just by examining how much time, energy, effort, and money both the Chinese and Russians are pouring into their nuclear programs, the only reasonable assumption to take is those programs are important, and the Chinese and Russians will do everything they can to protect them.
And so to treat it almost in a sort of flippant attitude is what really irritates me, because the people that are going to be reading this on the government side, not just in the West, but also in other parts of the world, are going to get a very different message. It's going to drive some of our adversaries to overreact, potentially speaking, and it allows us to fall on our laurels and just sit back and not worry about these things. It's like, why did you actually publish this if that's what you think? It's mind-blowing. It really is.
Thought-provoking, potentially dangerous, a conversation starter. The Masters of the Air report is certainly a lot of things, and you can read it for yourself. We'll have a link to it in this story on our website, san.com/weaponsandwarfare.
Serving you clarity through context, our mission at SAN is to deliver the news straight down the middle. We're different from mainstream media because we spotlight distorted headlines and show you how to do it too. Discover stories that right and left-leaning outlets are choosing not to cover by using our Media Mist tool. Download the SAN app and turn on notifications to have straight facts delivered right to your phone or tablet, and get straight facts anytime at san.com.
Time now for our Weapon of the Week, a place where we usually feature some of the most advanced technology and hardware in the world. A place where we featured new concepts in warfighting, and recently something called Operation Hard Kill in western New York State. But never before have we featured the commercial for the weapon along with the weapon itself. But as with most things Andruil does, this is something a little different. That's right, they've gone full-on anime to introduce the Barracuda M family of cruise missiles. Set to a remix of the 1977 Heart classic Barracuda, not a shock, the video quickly takes you inside the world of Andruil being created, at least in part, by co-founder Palmer Luckey. After reading a headline detailing America's need for more missiles to deter China, the factory swings into action, mass-producing the Barracuda 100, Barracuda 250, and Barracuda 500. Jump to the close, and we see a stylized Barracuda graphic as a lone 250 flies through the frame, only to be followed seconds later by a swarm of 250s. Back in the real world, the Barracudas are making real headlines. Introduced in early September, Andruil is touting their simplicity and affordability, with claims the Barracudas are the most producible cruise missiles on the market today, taking 50% less time to make with 95% fewer tools and 50% fewer parts, all at a fraction of the cost. Among the most eye-catching claims is that a Barracuda cruise missile can be assembled in your garage with less than 10 tools. So here's the breakdown on each variant. Built for quick, short missions, the Barracuda 100 is lightweight and launchable from the ground and air. Next up, the Barracuda 250. This mid-size model balances range, speed, and payload capacity, and is capable of fitting in the weapons bay of fighter jets. Finally, the biggest big brother, the Barracuda 500, has a range of nearly 600 miles, can carry 100+ pounds of payload capacity, is capable of withstanding 5 Gs of maneuverability, and offers more than 120 minutes of loitering time. While there is no official government buyer just yet, Andruil is confident enough they have plans to build a new factory to build weapons and military systems faster and in larger quantities. Earlier this year, we introduced you to a small company with a big idea and big ambitions. Lumina, a Denver startup, has quietly been installing their mind gyms at more than a dozen Air Force bases across the U.S. and beyond. The 7-foot by 7-foot cubes utilize the elements of isolation, meditation, reflection, light, and sound to create an experience designed to build up mental fortitude. Since installing the first mind gym on Hill Air Force Base in Utah, Lumina worked with 9 different Air Force major commands, and now they're poised to make their biggest move yet. And that's the subject of this week's Comms Check. After successfully navigating the DoD's Small Business Innovation Research Program, commonly referred to as SBIR, and proving the mind gym's effectiveness one installation at a time, the team at Lumina secured their first command-wide buy of the mind gym. So convinced of the potential to help the nearly 31,000 airmen assigned to Global Strike Command, Top Boss General Thomas Boussier wants mind gyms to be available to the bases and units under the Strike Command umbrella. Lumina's contract manager, Jamie Rohn, says it's validation for all the work that's already been put into the project.
So we did a number of installations, Travis, Little Rock, Hawaii, other Hill, started with Hill. But what the Global Strike Command contract actually marks is the first command-wide buy, which enables us to get our systems out in a single point. It's a 4-star level saying this is important, resiliency of our people is important, and it's now done and executed, codified in a contract, and we're going to be rolling that out over the next 60 to 90 days.
Just as Lumina's business with the Air Force is growing, so too is the user experience inside the mind gym. Taking feedback and information learned from its initial iteration, Lumina advisor Dr. Janelle McCauley says users can expect an experience that leans into everything the team at Lumina learned since their work with the Air Force began.
I'm really excited for people to have the opportunity to explore all the different, from the modules in the curriculum to the adaptive experiences, whether it's space or snow or rain. We're really kind of listening to the users and what they want to see and what they want to experience, and then developing and creating those spaces for them.
As with anything new, especially when it comes to areas like mental health, getting buy-in from prospective users can be a challenge. But Rohn says the knowledge that GSC's top boss is behind the initiative should help convince people.
This command-wide buy does legitimize and validate the fact that we do have something real and that it is actually not only good from a product standpoint, but it's literally changing lives. And so now how do we take the command-wide buy from Global Strike and move it to other MAGCOMs and replicate it?
It's an idea that might just find alignment with the Air Force's current push to restructure itself in the face of great power competition and an increasing focus on the growing threat that is China.
So we need access to these types of resources to ensure our warfighters are ready for the next fight. They're not distracted, they're more productive, they're more efficient in the things that they do, and then overall as a wellness tool. And so I'm hearing from a lot of the airmen today that that's what they're really finding the benefit, is that it's twofold, right? I'm learning these skill sets that are improving my overall wellness and mental health, but I'm also learning these skill sets that are making me better at my job and better at my life.
If you're thinking to yourself, that sounds pretty good, how can I get inside one of those boxes? Well, that opportunity could eventually be available beyond the bounds of the military. Lumina's leadership tells us they are already looking for the next landing spot for the mind gym and how they can reach even bigger groups looking for the help that they provide.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
All right, that's going to just about do it for us this week on Weapons in Warfare. Sure hope you learned something, and really hope you do every week. Remember, if you like what you saw, please like, subscribe, and share all of our social media channels. You can also reach out to us directly by emailing weaponsandwarfare@san.com. For this week's wrap, I'm going to spend just a few moments talking about the importance of service. And no, not only military service, but really service to others in a more general, utilitarian sense of the word. This topic hits a little close to home for me. The night before I recorded this segment, I was talking with my oldest kid about her volunteering at a local community event. She really did not want to do it, mainly because none of her friends would be there. Teens, am I right? But I get it. Putting yourself into the service of something greater can be a scary proposition, especially if you feel alone. But in my conversation with my daughter, I realized I was failing her because I'm not teaching her enough about the importance of selflessness, doing something for others and from which you yourself don't really directly benefit. Sure, we can wear shirts branded with "Be Kind," or we can post grandiose platitudes on social media, but when was the last time you volunteered? Volunteered to feed the hungry, help a neighbor, help coach a youth league? When was the last time you were truly selfless and put yourself in the service of something greater than you? For far too many of us, myself included, the answer is it's been too long. Years ago, we asked not what our
country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Well, right now, our country could use a little help. And in each of us resides the power to be that help. For senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphics artist Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson, Straight Arrow News, signing off.